Soon, and it is going to start now. Hooray! So, yeah, don't worry about it, dude. It's okay. Rise of Christianity. So we're going to start off with a recap, kind of going over some things. So we know that Christianity spread through Rome's borders. Yesterday, we went and saw the maps where we saw Christianity going from a little teeny tiny branch of Judaism to being the dominant religion in the Roman Empire. We know that in the beginning, Christianity was persecuted. For what's eventually going to happen is it's going to become the official Roman religion. They're going to get rid of paganism and follow Christianity. You already told me today that they're monotheistic. So one of the reasons why they're persecuted was because they wouldn't worship the emperor. They were pacifists, so meaning they didn't believe in killing. They took the commandment, thou shalt not kill, very seriously, so they would not fight in the army. Then the Romans thought the Christians were so weird because instead of putting their dead in a catacomb, which is essentially like an underground, like storage facility for dead bodies, you know, because just a little one, like in Indiana Jones, you see it with, you know, like all the skeletons and stuff like that. Let's see if I can get a good picture of a catacomb for you, so you can get an idea. Ooh, spooky. Oh man, these are really spooky catacombs that I have here. But here's some examples of catacombs. Yowzers. They don't always have skulls and bones going and making the whole thing up. This is the Paris catacomb, which is very, very peculiar. But typically it's more like this, where you have like little cubbies where they would go and put the bodies. All right. Man, that was spooky. This up here. Yowzers. Anyways, the Christians, they buried their dead. Yes, actually, just like Skyrim, like every dungeon is a catacomb, for Pete's sakes. It's crazy. All right. Christianity spread because of two main things. We're going to have shared languages and good transportation. Now, what language was the language of the Roman Empire? Hint, you all had this class in 5th grade, and you're going to have it in 6th grade, although I think you're in Spanish now, or maybe it's switched around. So what language is it going to be? Someone please put it in the chat. The delay is killing me, but yes, thank you, Rajvir. It is the language of Latin. So everybody spoke Latin, and they had good roads everywhere. Think about it. The Roman Empire, we talked about this last year, had enough roads in their little, and I say little because it just conquered, you know, North Africa, Europe, and parts of Western Asia. They had enough roads in that small area to circle the earth twice. And as everyone's able to communicate, so as Eli is going through Rome, acting like Paul and telling people the gospel with the good news of Jesus, you know, he said, you know, if you believe in Jesus, there's an afterlife, heaven, where you have paradise forever. And people were like, whoa, that sounds amazing. Because, yeah, most people's lives back then were really hard. They worked all day. They got very little sleep. They were often sick and they didn't have medicine. They were often hungry because they didn't have food. They were often taxed and didn't have money. They didn't have much of anything at all. And Eli said, hey, you guys could have paradise forever. Also, another huge boon for the spread of Christianity was the universality of Christianity, meaning any person could become a Christian. Just like how when we studied Buddhism and Hinduism, we had it where for most societies at this time, your faith was the faith of your family, the faith of where you were from. So when Buddhism came by in India and told the Sudras, told the pariah that you guys were just as equal as a Brahmin or a Kshatriya, that you guys could have, you know, freedom and enlightenment, people flocked to that with Buddhism. The same thing with Christianity. The people in there, they were, some of them were Jewish, some of them were pagan, meaning they believed in the pantheon of Roman gods, and then later on the Norse gods. And people said, whoa, anyone can become a Christian, anyone can have this promise? And, you know, they said, yeah. Another thing that impressed people was the martyrdom of Christians, because remember, when Christians were persecuted, they were killed. They were thrown to the lions. They were, barbecued. Terrible things, terrible. And they could have been free if they just said that they're not a Christian. Yet they would choose death over denying Christ. Another thing that helped the spread of Christianity was people saw Christians once again doing something very strange. The Christian communities were never rich. They were almost entirely extremely poor. And although they had poverty, they helped each other. They shared with each other. They took care of the widows and the orphans. Instead of letting them suffer and have nothing, they took what little they had and shared it. But not only would they share it within their communities that are local, they shared it with the greater Christian community, where churches in Rome were going and sending money to churches in Asia and sending money to churches in Africa, helping, even though they had barely had any money at all. So by 380 CE, Christianity actually becomes the official religion by Emperor Theodosius, because so many of the people already were Christians. And so he just said, okay, let's just make this official. And we know it wasn't until 313 that Constantine made Christianity legal with the Edict of Milan. Prior to that, like I said, Christians were killed just for being Christian. All right, so from this slide, do we have any questions or comments before we move on? I hate this, like being virtual and not seeing your faces to know if people are understanding or following along, to not know if Joel is taking a nap or taking notes. I'm sure he's taking notes because Joel's awesome. Now, we remember just quickly that story of Constantine, which the artist totally got wrong because he saw the Chi Rho in the sky and he heard, under this sign you will conquer. Of course, the Chi Rho looks like this with the P and the X, which stood for Greek for C and H. Actually, CR, because the Chi was the CH sound, and then the R was the Rho was the R sound. But yeah, hearing under the sign you will conquer, although it does kind of look nice with the cross and little baby cherubs going and doing it. Anyways, so how was the early church organized? How was the early church organized? And they base it off of the Roman Empire. So if we look at Matthew 16, there's a time where Jesus calls Peter the rock. He was Simon, and he gets renamed to Peter. And he says, I'm going to build my church upon this rock that's to you. And that, for people who follow Roman Catholic Christianity, say that institutes Peter as being something called the first pope. Now, the pope is going to be the head of the Roman Catholic Church, which creates this hierarchy where we have the pope, then we're going to have a group of people called the cardinals, and then below that a group of people called bishops, then we have priests, and then the regular people, the laity. And so with this, we have this direct link between, and like I said, this is Roman Catholicism that we're talking about because the early church was entirely Roman Catholic. And we're going to see some of the splits happening later on to go and change this. But yeah, so in the beginning, it was this direct link between God and the Pope. They gave the title of the Pope the Vicar of Christ, which meant that the Pope was the living representative of Jesus Christ on earth. And when that the Pope spoke as the Pope, he actually spoke with the authority of the Word of God, that he was infallible, meaning he could not make a mistake, and that what he said was what directly that God commanded. I know this is foreign to some of you because Roman Catholicism is not as popular in the United States as it is in other places, and Protestantism would disagree with this kind of relationship, which the majority of churches in the United States are Protestant. Now, there are the people called the clergy, and they're the people that work for the church. So if you're the Pope, you're clergy. If you're a cardinal, you're clergy. Bishops, priests, clergy. Pastors are still sometimes called clergy, although pastors, once again, are a Protestant title as opposed to being, a priest. And that's, a Catholic church has a priest, an Orthodox church has a priest, a Protestant church typically has a pastor or reverend, preacher, sometimes they call them. And finally, we have the laity, which are going to be the common, regular church members, the people that attend. They're the laity. The final word that you need to be familiar with is I cannot speak today, I apologize, is doctrine, which is official church teaching. And we're going to see how doctrine is going to change over time, and we're going to see how doctrine is going to cause the great schism of 1054, which we sing about in our song, and we'll have our song at the very end of this notes, which is very soon. You know, this what the church says, and we're going to see how doctrine is going to cause fighting, because the reason why we're all going back here, we're still with the Byzantines, but we need to make sure we have the background to find out why the Byzantines, things exploded with them and the Catholic Church. Now, doctrine was going to, of course, be based off of the Bible, primarily the words of Jesus from the Gospels, definitely things from the epistles, which are letters that Paul and other apostles wrote, but also church doctrine is going to be formulated by people like St. Augustine, who is going to write a lot of books. Essentially, he's going to write what are commentaries. An example of a commentary would be like this book right here, talking about the book of James and explaining what the book is saying. So here, you know, the book of James, it's a relatively short book in the Bible, but here I have, you know, a 220-page book explaining the book of James so that you know exactly what James is saying, you know, and there are hundreds of, you know, books about that sort of thing just to go and explain it. So that's how they get the title of doctrine with it. So that is going to be the lecture today. I'm going to stop recording. I would love it if people put